Welcome into the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. For some of you out there that are, let's just say, amateur, and I use that term succinctly, amateur investigators that are looking to get better in the field, we'll have a few tips for you today. For those of you who are even experienced investigators in the field of the paranormal, I think we'll even have even better tips for you today. There's some stuff today that we're about to learn from our guest, Chris Jordan, that I am looking forward to learning from Chris today. Because here's the deal, folks. When you get out there and you start investigating, we tend to be a little too, let's just say, dependent on our equipment and dependent on our memories. And we forget a few things about how we should incorporate science and use science in the paranormal. Our guest, Christopher Jordan, today is the host of Curious Realm, a podcast that delves into intriguing topics related to science, technology, history, and culture. His informative and entertaining episodes cover subjects like ancient civilizations, conspiracy theories, and futuristic technologies, featuring expert interviews and in-depth explorations. Chris is known for his engaging presentation style. He's also made complex topics accessible to a wide audience, which he'll do today, because we're going to delve into the science of the paranormal. We'll also talk a little bit about his music. He also deals in binaural beats. I want to talk to him about that because, in particular, I'm a chronic pain sufferer, and I want to talk to him a little bit about the world of binaural beats and some of the things that he does with his music in that, and we'll deal with that in the second part of the program today. Additionally, Christopher, as I said, is a composer renowned for his instrumental music, which incorporates solar system frequencies, binaural beats, and brainwave frequencies to aid in relaxation and meditation. His work is featured in meditation albums, corporate events, and videos, enhancing the listener's experience through soothing soundscapes. Christopher also has a wonderful, as we mentioned, podcast out there, Curious Realm. We will have a link in the description of this program so that you can access that wonderful podcast and get a look at what he does in outside of this program, outside of Darkness Radio. Let's bring him in. I've already gone on too long and not given him his due. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome in to Darkness Radio, Christopher Jordan. Christopher, how are you today, sir?
Doing great, Tim, and you?
Wonderful. Now that you're here, let's delve in right away into the world of the paranormal and the scientific realm of the paranormal. Too often I hear this, and this is the thing that bugs me really when it comes to, I'm going to use the word amateur here, and I don't use it in a condescending way. But let's face it, there's no such thing really as a professional paranormal investigator. And unless you're on television and getting paid for it, we're all amateurs, right?
Sure.
So
yeah, it's like saying that there's a Bigfoot expert. Well, you may be expert in the lore of Bigfoot, but you cannot be a biological expert in Bigfoot yet.
Yeah.
We need to prove Bigfoot first.
Exactly. So as amateur investigators, the most common thing out of everyone's mouth is, well, I use a scientific method. I am a skeptic. Right? That's like saying, I like ice cream. It's a pretty across the board, statement. I never hear an investigator come out and say, I'm a full blown believer. I believe everything that gets thrown past me. I whiff on that sucker like a fast 95 mile an hour fastball being blown by me. No investigator has ever said that in the history of the paranormal. Not that I've heard anyway. So with that being said, everybody loves their science. Everybody loves to believe that they're bringing the most science to the table, if I could put it that way. I know I'm making this a longer and longer question, but here's the deal, Chris. Nobody, and I mean nobody, seems to bring pure scientific method to the table. So what is it that we are doing wrong?
Well, number one, and I am with you whenever you say amateur. Absolutely, weekend warrior, what have you. But here's the thing. Citizen science finds so much, Tim. So much. 90% of our comets out there are not found by observatories. They are found by people like me with the telescope and a camera taking pictures of the same swath of sky every night, and they observe a subtle movement in something. We are the ones that find stuff because we have more time on the night sky than a professional telescope does, believe it or not. They're tasked with all kinds of stuff. That's how they make their money and stay alive. That's how they literally keep the lights of that telescope on. So citizen science is hugely important. Now, part of the issue that we have is literally terminology. It's terminology. When it comes to science, terminology is very specific. A prime example would be the relabeling of UFO to UAP.
Yes.
A lot of people in a lot of communities very upset about that, and I firmly understand it. I got into this because of UFOs too. However, UFO, paranormal, Bigfoot, these things are a Kleenex box. It's like saying Kleenex. It's like saying Xerox. There's 101 ways to make a facsimile. We all call it a Xerox. We throw it into the box labeled as Kleenex when there's 101 things called facial tissue that are not Kleenex. So science doesn't like a Kleenex box. It likes the 1,001 products called facial tissue. It wants the variety. It wants the clear definition. So when you say, here is my photo and its evidence, you've jumped the shark for science. See, you've already gone past observation, past the point of research on a topic, and gone past the point of test and gone into analysis of something before you've gone through everything. And while the picture is worth 1,000 words to the person that took it because it expresses what they were doing, it gives them a memory of what was happening at the time, things like that. The scientist in the lab has 0 point of reference.
Yes.
To any of that.
Yes.
All they have is a picture. They need the 1,000 words, Tim. Science needs the 1,000 words. And unfortunately, evidence is what exonerates you in court. And never let it be less than that. Ever.
Yeah.
Ever. What you're bringing to the table with the picture that you took is a point of datum that you're adding to a data set, which is an important point of datum, whether it is kept in the data set or culled from the data set for not being accurate data, good data, usable data. It doesn't matter. You're still growing the data set, even though you're rejecting data from it. So there's a term in science called killing your darlings, with my air quotes up there for you listeners. Quotes, killing your darlings. And the idea is, even if you are the Nikola Tesla of this idea, you have to be ready to let the idea die on the table for the sake of science. You have to be willing to let it go, even though you're the one that found it. Once things are proven, once things get to a point, you've got to be willing to let it go. Because if you hold on to it, now when something does come in that realm, it's being corrupted by what you're not letting go. Data-wise, and it's a very dispassionate way to look at things. Nobody's saying to dismiss your experience at all, because science begins with experience. The first step of the scientific process is observation, experience, and question. Literally the first step. So even by going out in the woods with a trail cam and looking for pictures on the regs, you are taking part in the scientific process right there. Observation, and from there you research. Now, the problem is, without the data in between the two, there's nothing to research, Tim. If you're just presented an image, and I'll bring something up here for you.
Yeah,
let me find it, because it's a pretty interesting clip that I use regularly to express what I'm talking about here. And it's the fact of, if you don't have all the data, if you don't have everything that you need, you're going to have a problem. And here comes the actual video.
Sure.
Let's see here. There you go.
Okay.
I took this picture in my backyard. Now, you can see this object is moving. It's moving around, all kinds of stuff.
Now, for the audio audience, describe to them what it is we're looking at.
You're looking at a soft circle of light that is slowly moving through the frame. You see things moving around in the light. For many, it would almost appear to be an orb, something like that. I've got it still framed on the screen right now. It slowly moves through the frame. You can see things swimming around inside of it as it goes, stuff like that. Now, if I posted that picture on 90% of social media with zero data behind it, I would get a lot of responses. And I have gotten a lot of responses whenever I've done it. And then I follow it up with the data. And I tell them, unfortunately, that is a video of the star Sirius out of focus in my telescope. Nothing more. A very common object in the night sky, something that is seen by just about everybody if you go out and look. One that commonly will flash red and blue depending on the layers of the atmosphere going in front of you, things like that. But if I post it with no data, I can take that story anywhere.
Yeah.
It's the data behind the story. It's the data behind the picture that matters. What time of day was the picture taken? What direction were you facing? What temperature was it outside? Because believe it or not, rapid temperature inversion makes a big difference on observation of objects in the distance. You know, I live in Texas. So when you're talking about 100-degree day that rapidly drops to 85 degrees at night, you get the lensing in the atmosphere, things like that. You get pockets of hot air, cold air. When that happens, you see things move erratically in the sky. You know,
right.
That's what the atmosphere makes happen by nature, you know. So you could be utterly looking at a star in the sky that is moving like this, moving like that, flashing blue and red, all kinds of stuff. It's merely a star that is not in focus in your camera that is going through layers of the atmosphere. So you've got to know the surrounding data behind the video, behind the image. Go ahead.
Okay, so to find that answer, and now the first thing that most people would do, if they see that image and they're seeing that image through a telescope, they're probably jumping for joy, first of all. The emotion floods them. They overreact. They think, man, I must have something. They record it. They go to bring it to somewhere. Maybe they bring it to MUFON. Maybe they bring it somewhere, and they're going to want to battle somebody. I'm sure is the first reaction.
Absolutely.
I got something. I don't know what it is. I don't know. But it's got to be something. Look at this. Look at it moving. It's got to be something, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be a craft, got to be a creature. It's got to be something. I don't know what I got, but it's got to be something. Now they bring it to somebody who they know probably has more experience than them, but because it's the first time they've seen something, they have strong feelings. Again, we're tying emotion to something that should be clinical, which is science, right?
Sure.
And you're bringing it to somebody who is being clinical and wants to look at it and goes, no, I'm sorry, but here's what you have, unless you cross-reference it with things that are clinical, with either texts, or you go online and you look at NORAD, or you look at something that could tell you, well, this is what's in the night sky in that particular direction that you're looking at. In your case, what did you cross-reference to figure out that that's a star?
Well, in that case, I absolutely knew that was a star, Tim. That was one of the stars that I was using for polar alignment for my telescope.
Okay.
At the time, it was just not in focus, and I took the image because of what it was doing. I literally took the video because I was like, "This is a teaching moment, right here." Because it's very easy to confuse these things. And yes, once again, when you are passionately looking for something, it can be very hard to look at what you get dispassionately. And that's why you should have friends to pass it in front of. That's why you should write down the circumstances in which something happens as soon as possible. This last week at the MUFON Symposium, one of the people that I interviewed was UFO PD or UAP PD out of Arizona. It's a bunch of former officers who are moving for the cause of disclosure and, no shame coming forth for officers of the law who are typically threatened with their badge, things like that, threatened with their career, same as Navy pilots and commercial pilots if they come forward with experience. And, we had a discussion about that the show last 48 hours and the importance in a police investigation of getting the data, getting the witnesses, getting things like that before 48 hours passes. Once 48 hours passes, people have had time to process things. People have had time to start filtering it through their filter of experience. Stories start changing. Facts of the situation start changing 48 hours later. So if you don't get that down immediately, as soon as you can, separate those people, get their stories, get them again, get them in a different situation, that you're going to lose data. And without that, the data is now corrupted, as is the investigation, So if you are out in the field, if you are out squatching and you get a picture with your trail camera, did you write down all the data that goes with that? Did you write down your experience of your sighting as soon as you had it? Or did you have to wait till you got back to camp an hour later after your hike?
Now, Christopher, let me ask you this. When you're writing something down and you're writing it down fresh, are you writing from a spot of emotion, or do you take yourself out of the emotion, maybe settle yourself down for a few moments, and then write from a spot that's kind of outside of yourself? How do you recommend writing down something out of an incident?
Well, when it comes to experience, you want it to be as raw as possible.
Okay.
It's kind of like if a police officer is interviewing somebody who's a victim and they start crying, they don't ask them like, okay, calm it down. Let's, like that emotion is part of the experience.
Okay.
That emotion tells you a story as to what happened, how that person, how their stasis was changed by the experience, so you kind of want that raw emotional data, like as much of that raw as emotional data as possible, because some of that is going to be what disappears. It's kind of that moment that you see in the movies where something shocking happens to someone and like the world goes deaf and you hear the whistling tone and everything kind of gets blurry for a minute. Like there's that experience for them right there that is uniquely theirs, but they're muted from the world around them, and you kind of want to know about that. You want to know about everything as much as possible in as great a detail as possible. So I would say, just as somebody who has talked with MUFON field investigators, things like that, you want it as fresh as possible. You want the emotion in there. Definitely go back through and whenever you've had time to process it, write down another account. And that's kind of what the book is for, is to be able to compare and contrast notes between cases, to be able to write down, were there other witnesses there at the location? How do you get their information? To be able to sketch what you saw as you saw it.
And Christopher has I should let people know, you have a field observation and encounter log that we have a link to in the description of this program. It's been put out by Curious Research, which helps you to, it's really a key to good science and good research. So it will help you kind of properly put down whether you're squatching, whether you're out there seeking UFOs, whether you're in a paranormal investigation as far as ghosts go, from beginning to end, properly log the experiences that you're having and turn that experience into actual research, correct?
Yeah. No, that's just it. Because once again, and I've been a part of many paranormal investigations. I've been out on and Sasquatch hunt. I've been out on numerous, go out and scam people's property for targeted individuals, things like that. And even then, the notes that you take can sometimes be spurious, and they're on the spot, and it can be hard to think about it while you're in the middle of it. I've showed the book to a few scientists this last weekend, like laboratory scientists, and to hear them say, this is really cool to have like a standardized intake form for data, because we write ours on the spot, like for whatever we need. And sometimes, 2-3 days into things, you may think like, oh my God, I need this variable. I totally forgot about that. So to have that kind of data on hand where you don't have to think about it, where it's literally a form that you fill out, because it's one thing to fluidly write down what's in front of you, what you've experienced. It's another thing to start having to think in a logical process as far as data gathering when you just heard a glass fall on the floor and break in an empty house at 3 a.m. in the dark, where all the power's off. So yeah, to write that data down for the experience, you've literally turned your location into a laboratory at that point. You're taking lab notes for science instead of just writing down what time a glass broke or what time you heard a shattering glass, because once again, even hearing that on a recording, that's like seeing it in a photograph. We need the 1,000 words with it. We need as much of the circumstance with that as possible in order to explore it scientifically.
So now let me play devil's advocate with you here, Chris.
Please.
And that's this. You have some people who go out and actually do this investigation thing for quote unquote fun.
Sure.
And part of it, although they do claim they want to quote unquote do it from a scientific point of view, they also do it for a bit of the scare factor. And is there a bit of taking the fun factor out of it by logging your evidence, or is it part of the fun to log your evidence? Is there an argument for both?
I would venture a guess that there's an argument for both, and my reasoning would come down to this, because eventually you're going to run into somebody that isn't just about the story of your experience. It's about who else was there when it happened. You're always going to, and I wear the skeptic badge like a Superman S, my friend, with pride. Like, I will rip my shirt open at the right moment and jump into action. But what people don't understand about skeptic is that a true skeptic is waiting for the data that will change their mind. I'm not trying to poo-poo anything.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I'm a believer, but because I'm a believer, my realm of evidence must be greater. It's got to be greater. It cannot be less than. I cannot just go off of a picture alone. And I talk with King Gerhardt cryptozoologist regularly, and he is one that will say, I do not believe we will prove the existence of Bigfoot from a picture alone.
Right.
It won't be a picture, you know, and it's one of those, like, we have a very long scientific timeline to discovery, Tim. Most people do not realize that. I have a very young cryptozoologist up the road, Ryan Edwards, who speaks about this regularly, and I have firmly lifted it because it's a beautiful point of observation in the scientific process. The example is the lowland gorilla. Natives had heard about the lowland gorilla. They had talked about it for generations, all kind of things. They had no interest in finding the lowland gorilla. It's something that they just share the woods with. Now, when Anglos came along and we heard about the lowland gorilla, we're a very curious scientific type. We are interested in things like that. Let's go forth and let's catalog this mysterious animal. It took us 70 years to find the lowland gorilla.
Wow.
We are just verging on that 70-year point with Bigfoot, with Anglos being interested in it from the point of Patterson-Gimlin, and science going, well, let's take a look at that. We're just at that 70-year point. We're just at that 70-year point with Roswell. You know? So it's interesting to think about that 70 to 100 year point of discovery of science, where it's like, it takes science about 70 to 100 years to close that gap and to find it. So we're just coming up on that. We're just coming up on the fact where science has said, hey, quantum reality is a thing. Two atoms can talk despite distance. Spooky action at a distance is a thing. And everything that they talked about in remote viewing is real. The idea that two atoms, despite distance, can influence each other. Quantum entanglement won the Nobel Peace Prize 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, like that is directly what Hal Puthoff talked about in his paper on scientists that were affecting their experiments when they went home and thought about them. Like, that is the paranormal. That is the backyard of science. The job of science is that 5% unknown quantitative. I don't think I would have passed high school chemistry if I couldn't tell my teacher what happened to the 5% remainder of solution. Did it become gas and off gas? Did it become sediment? What happened to you're only showing me 95% of this completed chemical equation. Where's the other 5%? Without that, the equation didn't complete.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and that's a lot of what NASA said in their first panel was the changing of this to UAP and labeling it phenomenon takes it out of the Kleenex box and puts it in our purview. It is our job to find that 5% anomaly so that we can eradicate it from the data set that we're trying to study. You know? So the 5% anomaly that is UFO UAP has to be explained so that when it's an unexplainable in your experiment, you can discount it from your results. But you've got to explain it in order to do that.
Right, right.
So we're up against that with a lot of science right now. It's really interesting to see so much science coming to the world of the paranormal. Even coming to the point of showing the connection between these paranormal events, the fact that, like, yes, there are multiple dimensions, you know, pretty remarkable stuff. But we've got to have our data ready to shake their hand. You know, it's kind of like the work of Alan Alda right now. He goes out and he speaks to scientists on how to talk science like a normal human being. So because the problem is these scientists can get together in a room with other scientists and talk about acetylsalicylic acid and the things that it does and stuff like that. However, the average investor has no idea what the heck you're talking about.
Yeah.
You got to be able to break this down in a 5-minute chunklet man, that they can digest and go, ooh, I want to give you $500,000, man. Let's make this sexy science happen. But you've got to be able to speak their language, and that's just it. Like, there is a very specific language to science, and there's a very specific way that they communicate points of data and points of datum to a data set, so we've got to learn to speak their language, and we've got to be ready to shake their hand on their terms.
I had no idea Alan Alda was doing that.
Yeah. It's
really
pretty cool, man. I've seen him at a couple of different events that I've worked across the country where he comes in and speaks to him about like, hey, we need to get you guys to be able to talk to these guys, to be able to explain things in normal human terms that the average person driving a truck down the road can understand. And that's even us in society, man, because there is a whole world of sexy science going on out there that the media does not tell us about. Like, I think every local newscast should end with like a sexy science story at the end of the night, just to get rid of all the tripe that you've gotten to see and all the horrible things. Because, like, if people knew that CERN turned light into matter 3 years ago, light into matter, that's like 3 steps away from replicator, coffee black.
Yeah.
That is exciting science. That's sexy. And most people don't know it's happening. They don't know that it's out there. They don't know that these realms are being pushed, that people like Hal Puthoff right down the road from me is working on how to extract power from a vacuum.
Really?
And getting results.
Whoa.
Yeah, man. Power from a vacuum.
That's crazy.
Wild stuff.
That is crazy.
But by compressing a vacuum, getting almost like a piezoelectric effect out of a vacuum by squeezing it. It's mind-numbing science to think about. Literally power from nothing. From nothing. So, yeah. The science is crossing over into the paranormal on the regular, and citizen scientists out there, every one of you out there with an EVP recorder, with you are doing science, whether you realize it or not. That's the experimental part of science. You have observed something, you have heard a story, you've seen an article, something about the place that you're going to investigate. You've researched it. You've read up on it. You've heard stories. You've listened to podcasts. It's gotten your interest going. You have a hypothesis. You think the place is haunted. You think something is there. The next thing to do is test and experiment. That's the first 4 steps of the scientific process.
Let's do this, Christopher. Let's take our break here, and then let's talk a little bit about how to scientifically conduct your investigation, because I think people don't know how to do that. I think you think you just show up, something happens, we have a good time, we go home. When we come back, we'll talk to Christopher Jordan about how we scientifically conduct our investigation. We'll do that when we come back. The book is out there right now, and I encourage you all to go and pick up a copy, because we all at one time or another want to get out there. We want to keep investigating, but we should be doing it the right way. The Field Observation and Encounter Log is out there right now from Curious Research. And it's actually out there for a nominal fee. And I think you all should have a copy. Let's face it, whether you're squatching, whether you're going out there looking for UFO or UAP, or whether you're conducting a ghost investigation, you should bring one with you so you can properly log it. And we have, again, a link in the description of this program so you can get a hold of that Field Observation and Encounter Log. When we come back, more with Christopher Jordan, we'll talk about how to scientifically conduct your paranormal investigation. That with Christopher Jordan next on the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. Welcome back to the best in paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. With me today is Christopher Jordan. He's got a lot going on, folks. First of all, he's got this wonderful field observation and encounter log out there. We're talking today about paranormal investigation, how to conduct it in a scientific way. I know we're all talking about science, and we're talking about, how we want to scientifically conduct our investigations and do it the right way. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but Christopher has this wonderful field observation and encounter log. It's put out by your research company, by Curious Research. There we go. I don't know why that slipped my mind there. Curious Research, because I guess I'm not curious enough, right? That's the deal. Curious Realm is the name of the podcast, which we also have a link in the description for. Curious Realm, Curious Research. It's all one curious thing, right? Right, Christopher?
That's right.
Curious Realm is out there, and there are some wonderful guests out there. We had Les Velez on a couple weeks ago. Les Velez has been on your show as well. Also, Dr. Simeon Hine, who's been on this program, and Reverend Peter Panagore. A couple of great guests you've had on your program as well, and some great discussion over there. So Curious Realm podcast is out there. We're also going to talk a little bit later in the program about binaural beats. I mentioned in the beginning of the program, yours truly is an amazing chronic pain sufferer, broken neck and back and all that fun stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about binaural beats and about the science of the mind here coming up in just a little bit. So before the break, Christopher, we were talking about how to scientifically conduct your investigation. Now, we pick up a copy of the log here from you. And first of all, I know a lot of people like to want to rush in, okay? They want to rush in. And the first thing is, well, it's okay, Christopher, I got this covered, right? I got my EVP recorder. I got a video camera. Even if I forget a few details, it's okay. I've got everything on my recorder. I got everything on my video camera. Whatever I don't have is going to be filled in by my instruments, right? We're good. Where am I going?
Sure. Well, for me, it really starts with preparation. As we mentioned before the break, there's a whole world of science coming out about our connection to the world around us, that whole idea of quantum entanglement, the whole idea of scientists affecting their experiments whenever they come home from the lab, just thinking like, did I put too much solution in that beaker? So if you're preparing your equipment, the last thing you should be doing is thinking about your location. In all sincerity and in all theory, the last thing you should be doing is thinking about your location, because you may actively be psychically charging that location for activity before you ever get to it. You're already starting to affect your experiment. You're already starting to put a lens on what you're going to experience and the data that you're going to collect and things like that. You're already like narrowing the focus before you even go in. And may actively, especially if it's a location that is charged with energy, things like that, you may actively be putting something there before you ever get there. And that's a concept paranormally that we really need to think about, man.
See, that's like the opposite of everything that you see on television. I know television is not what we should be.
I know
what we should be gauging our investigations on.
Scientific method upon.
Right, but that's what every amateur.
Yeah.
Every amateur investigator says, man, I'm going to Waverly this weekend. I can't wait to get to Waverly. I can't wait to see Big Black. I can't wait to go down that hallway. I can't wait to do the experiment where I close my eyes or whatever, or go down that hallway, that black hallway with just me and nothing, no flashlight, no nothing. And it's the same repeated experiment over and over and over again, Chris. So they're already putting the intention out there before they're even there. So you're saying wipe that out.
Try to be as blank slate as possible. Know that you are going to, and it's kind of the idea of remote viewing, quite literally. In a controlled room, and there is numerous types of remote viewing, but in a traditional controlled remote viewing situation, that remote viewer has been given a task by a supervisor and by a monitor, and they do not know what it is. They know that they are going to view an event. That's it. Or a location. Nothing more. Nothing more. They know zero details about it. You want them to be as dispassionately involved as possible so that the data that comes into them is not corrupted. As a matter of fact, before you even start a remote viewing session, there's a part where you go through a personal inventory where it's like, what's distracting me? What's been on my mind? Let's remove these things from the data set, because when this comes up, it may come up because my dog got lost last week and I ain't found him yet. You know, these are distractors. These are things that are going to be stray cats in the session as opposed to focused data that's actually coming in. You know, so you've got to be willing to do that same thing. You've got to be willing to, as we said in the beginning with the air quotes, kill your darlings. It's okay. It's okay. Because in theory, you're there to prove or disprove something, right? You're there to you contribute to a data set on a location. So the more data you can bring to it, the better, you know, because unfortunately, pareidolia rules the day in the human mind. Our brains search for patterns. They want a pattern. They would oh so much rather live in a state of partial hypnotic pattern than to actively do something. You know,
okay.
And that there's a big reason for that. You know, it's what helped us survive for millions of years. It's what helped us recognize, hey, those trees over there like provide food. Though that pattern of trees says that, you know, there's probably water there because of how they're growing together. You know, that kind of stuff. Like those things are survival, and they're in us, and they're in there for a reason. But we've got to make sure that we don't let the pattern rule the day. And we've got to make sure that we don't let our pattern of thought rule the day when it comes to setting up your observations, when it comes to preparing for a scientific day in the field, you know, because it's our rote patterns that'll get us in trouble. The prime example that I normally give is when I was in abnormal psychology. In college, we went and observed the gorillas at the Dallas Zoo. And I remember my professor regularly telling me, Chris, the data stops when the gorilla picks up the stick. You write down, gorilla picked up stick, 10 a.m., the date. 10:15 a.m., gorilla put stick down. Anything other than that is personification of the gorilla and why he's picking up the stick. And that's not science. That is your educated opinion as to why the gorilla picked up the stick. You are now inferring that into the situation to go beyond, like, you know, like he put it up to his head. Was he trying to, did he have an itch? We have no idea. And to even go down that rabbit hole is hearsay and conjecture, and it's not data. So to get past the point of passion, to get past the point of purposeful digging of curiosity while you're on location and in that heated moment, you know, and that's kind of the point of the log, is to write things down as they happen. And then go back and process it through your filters later, you know. Let that filter of reality set in later. Right now, get the data down while it's raw, as it's happening.
That's going to bring up another point here, Chris, and that's this.
Sure.
Okay, so as you're doing Frank's Box sessions, or as you're doing EVP sessions, and you're asking questions, that brings in a lot of inference when you're bringing along a line of questioning. A lot of people spiral off into questions based on their experience. right?
Sure.
So if they get a word, a lot of wordplay is done in association with a Frank's box session, right? A lot of people try to use their intuition, thinking, if I get the word sandwich, are you hungry for a sandwich? Do you need a sandwich? Would you like a sandwich? A lot of people like to play word games, right? When they
and that's part of the test. That's part of the testing. That's part of the active experiment. That is the poking of the phenomenon to see what the response is. And the important thing that comes with that is writing down all the relevant data that happened when it happened, writing down what you believe you heard, things like that, leaving it at that, and going through analysis. That's what the step of analysis is for. And the thing is, even though you're experimenting and prodding at the time, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're analyzing things at that moment. That's what you shouldn't be doing, is analyzing things while you're in the midst of it. Even the scientist mixing things in the beaker is writing down his observations of what happens in the beaker, and he will analyze that data later, not while the chemical reaction is currently happening. That's when you're supposed to be observing. That's when you're supposed to be taking data. You're not supposed to be analyzing it at that point. And I think that's part of the problem, is that, yes, unscientifically, people are analyzing data at the point of collection. And you've got to dispassionately remove that point of analysis. When you're analyzing data as it comes in like that, you are not dispassionately analyzing said data. You're in an adrenalized state. You just heard that voice box talk to you again. So while you're poking and prodding it, you shouldn't be analyzing it. You should just be collecting the data of the poking and the prodding.
With that, do you feel like people would get cleaner results? Like you would get the meaning of what it is you're setting out to find at that particular point? And do you think people would find more false positives that way? Like maybe the things you're getting from a Frank's box, or maybe the EVP you're getting is simply just crosstalk.
Could be. And that's where we come back on that third beat, Tim, to killing your darlings and being willing to. It's okay, because you still got a response of something. Once again, even data culled from the data set is still important data. You are subtracting what will now become known quantitatives. And without the known quantitative being subtracted, you cannot have the remainder of the paranormal. If it's happening every single time that you're going out with a Frank's box, it's no longer paranormal, it's normal. You see? You've lost the para. You've lost the 5% anomaly in what you're doing. You're supposed to be finding the 5% anomaly and having data for that, and subtracting all of the known quantitatives. So if it's happening to you every single time you go out in the field, it may not be anomaly. And that's okay, because you're still subtracting a known quantitative from the anomalous data set. And that's just as important as finding the anomaly.
Very interesting indeed. What are some other things that people aren't doing when they're on these investigations that could add to a scientific method?
Well, quite honestly, one of the best things that you can do, especially if you're out squatching, things like that, if you have trail cameras, what you're discounting is non-evidence and trashing and deleting. Good God, get a hold of your local wildlife program, get a hold of your local college biology department. They do not have money, funds, or time to go get cameras out to count brown bears, to count birds in the field, things like that. You could literally be handing this data over to science for normal observation and research.
Huh.
You know, you could literally be adding to the actual scientific data set of research that's going on with wildlife in your backyard by handing it over to the local college biology program, things like that. And once you're doing that, they get to know you and they realize the fact that you ain't just some dude out there feeding nanners to Bigfoot from your backyard. And I got this picture, buddy. Take a look at it. No, you've been giving them data, invaluable data, and shaking their data hand. They love you now.
Interesting. Okay.
And now your data that you bring them with that and an anomaly. Hey, man, you know, I know I brought you all these other trail cam pictures of black bears and things like that in my Dropbox, but I got this weird one. You mind taking a look at that for me? You know?
Yeah.
It's called social engineering, and that's how spies get work done.
Huh.
Like, my favorite analogy is the guy on Better Call Saul who kept bringing like all the cake pops to the lady at the bank.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
If you keep bringing cake pops to the lady at the bank, she'll let you go in that back door and, you know, put money in the bank all day long without ever walking back there with you. You know? But you've got to be able to social engineer, and you've got to be able to shake their hand in the way that they want it shaped. You know, and if you're out there being a citizen scientist, you're culling information from your data set that they could absolutely use in their everyday data set. Why not give it to them?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
You know,
if you're
why not shake hands with science and say, hey, I know I'm out here doing this fringe thing, but while I'm doing that, the stuff I'm culling is stuff that you could use. I would love to give that to you.
Yeah, if you're doing the work anyways, why not share it?
Yeah, precisely. Because that's what science is. It's the sharing of data. It's the open sharing of data. You know, we cannot ask them and fault them for not openly sharing data with us when we are not openly sharing data with them. You know, it's kind of like they said in that second NASA panel where they were like, you know, we finally took all of this out of a Kleenex box and put it into the backyard of science. And we've admitted that we were woefully irresponsible for not looking into this because it was in a Kleenex box instead of labeled something that we actively investigate. However, what doesn't help is going on social media and bullying these scientists. For some reason, bullied scientists don't want to be involved with science.
Imagine that.
You know? So it's one of those, like, bring to them what they need, and you'd be surprised. Like, we can work cooperatively, despite the fact that we're coming at this from two different sides, because eventually, and I say this pretty regularly, Tim, eventually it's going to be the case of, so you're researching Bigfoot. You're researching portals. Bigfoot walks through a portal. Which side do you start researching that from?
True.
Because we haven't proven the portals and we haven't proven the Bigfoot either. And now you've got two phenomenon occurring at the same time. And which one do you start investigating first?
Yeah. You got to prove one or the other.
You got to prove one or the other first.
Yeah.
You know? There's got to be a Bigfoot to walk through the portal, and there's got to be a portal there for the Bigfoot to walk through. So you've got to start from one end or the other, and without thinking of things in a scientific way like that, and without being willing to, you know, the beautiful part of science is that third step, the hypothesis. People regularly say, you know, I have a theory. The problem is theory comes after the regular repetition of the scientific process and proof and testing. Then we have a theory. No, we have a hypothesis.
Yeah.
Even with conspiracies, you have a conspiracy hypothesis. You're allowed to hypothesize any wild and crazy thing in the world. You know, and it's interesting. It's interesting because, we can follow the scientific method in our paranormal investigations. It's not incredibly hard to do so.
Right.
It really isn't. And you can still gather good data. You can still have good voice box sessions. You can still have good EVP sessions. The main thing is realizing that you should not be analyzing that data on the fly.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Because once you go down the rabbit hole of analyzing it on the fly, you've lost the continuous testing and gathering of data at that point.
Very true. Very true. You had mentioned before that the mind is malleable, especially once you've seen that data, and you've gotten further and further away from your experience. I want to talk a little bit about as we're getting towards the end of our program here about malleable minds and about the other part of your business, which is about music and binaural beats in particular, and the fact that you do this wonderful business. I myself suffer with chronic pain. I've suffered with chronic pain for decades. And I started suffering with it in my 20s. And I'm now in my mid 50s. And it's one of those things where, pain medications only go so far, and they lose their efficacy. And you need to turn to other things. And I was actually turned on to binaural beats a few years back, and they work wonderfully. It's one of those things where, you can put them on before you turn in. The only problem I have is that they knock me right out.
That's great.
I put
That's
on
good. That means your brain is in tune and ready.
Yeah, that's
Tim.
true.
That's
true.
fantastic.
It's true. But you put on your earbuds or your headphones and you're out like a light. And you wake up feeling refreshed, and which I love. And I've turned on other friends who need them. Friends who have anxiety, friends who have issues with pain, friends who have, other issues going on. And it's not just a pain thing. I mean, there's other things, smoking cessation, things like that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and a lot of it, even when it comes to smoking, when it comes to pain, when it comes to how we process things, once again, Tim, to go back to our pre-break conversation, we are pattern generating machines. We want to live in a pattern. If you drive to work every day and drive more than 3-5 exits down the road from your house, in all likelihood, you spend a good 60 to 70% of your daily drive in a hypnotic state. From the time you get on the freeway to the time you get off, you likely do not realize all the exits in between. Your brain knows where to get off the freeway. You know where to go. You don't have to think about it. From the time that we know how to walk as human beings, we don't have to command our body to walk. We think, ooh, I need to go to the bathroom. And you get up and you go autonomically. You don't think about it.
Right.
So we have numerous rote patterns that our brains go through. And yes, even the idea of pain and the cessation of pain and the sensation of pain, Tim, is a regular pattern. So no different than the want of smoking or something like that. It's a pattern in our brain that we have put our brain into, and that, we can kind of, consent out of that system by utilizing our brain to basically generate the frequencies that are associated with that, or associated with the cessation of that, with the negation of that.
How did you first come about learning that you could use these different frequencies, and how did you start to mess around with it and learn that you could do this and make it into an industry?
I will honestly say, when I first found binaural beats, things like that, it was after my work in abnormal psychology. Me and my professor regularly had conversations about one of my fascinations in the world, subliminal learning, because I used to actively make my own subliminal learning tapes in college. And granted, knowing a little bit about the way the brain learns, I also understand the fact that while I was writing down the things that I needed to record on those tapes, my brain was learning it while I was writing it. That's that like tactile and visual right there, you know. Mm-hmm. And then as I read it, it was auditory and visual.
Yeah. Yep.
Learning it. But then I would fall asleep to that tape for my test of all the facts that I needed to know, things like that, and I would have it on repeat while I slept.
Wow.
You know, and that's how I studied for tests in college, was through putting it all on tape and listening to it while I was asleep. And he was fascinated by the fact that me at 19 years old was doing something like this. It's like, he was like, when did you start doing this? And I was like, when I was in theater and I had to learn my lines.
Oh, wow.
I would act out the lines around me and everything else so that it was like me lit. Because if I watch a movie like Fletch, mm-hmm. I can repeat that thing for the rest of my life. Like I could probably line by line quote the whole movie Fletch, because that's how my brain works. If I hear it, I can repeat it.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it goes in there, and I just always remember it takes 5 years to age cheese. It doesn't go away. So he was like, wow, that's remarkable that you cued into that on yourself. And he got me into the world of subliminal psychology, the world of especially subliminal film works, because he was the film history teacher as well.
Yeah.
And he turned me on to things like The Exorcist and stuff like that, where they used a lot of subliminal work in the audio engineering of that movie, and in the soundscaping of that movie. So when I first started making my avant-garde music, things like that, a lot of it was very representative, you know, like things like Destruction of Earth, stuff like that, very long compositional pieces, much more playing with sound and sonics than melody and harmony. Mm-hmm. A lot akin to making a sonic piece like that in The Exorcist, where you're making a cacophony of sounds, something that gutturally moves you. And that's when I found the work of the Monroe Institute and binaural beats and solfeggio frequencies and other frequencies that had been out there. Things like 19 hertz, which is the frequency like that kind of makes you feel like something's in the room with you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't necessarily for healing purposes when I first started using these frequencies, Tim. Mm-hmm. It was to complement the music that I was writing. Mm-hmm. Like if I was taking you to an ethereal heavenly realm, I would use things like 528, like the crown chakra, things like that, and like bury it way down below the music. Okay. Well, your brain's still going to hear it, you know, but your conscious mind isn't. It's kind of that idea of the subliminal one frame in 30 frames of a film, like Fight Club. Yep. You know, we have laws against that type of advertising because it worked.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It did.
Because it worked.
Yeah.
And they can show it worked. So yeah, our brains are totally ready to tie into that, and the physics behind that is called entrainment. If any of you out there are a watcher of the great show Mythbusters that used to be on Discovery Channel, they did a beautiful entrainment exercise one time and proved the fact that, yes, entrainment exists when they did their pendulum experiment, where they put pendulums on a board with springs and then swung them different ways, and eventually they locked up together. Mm-hmm. Our brains do the same thing. My wife and I, she's probably about 1.5 feet shorter than me. Our strides are totally different, but when we walk down a hallway, eventually we lock step, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot, and then we'll fall out. Your brain does the same thing because it wants that pattern. So yeah, that's kind of how frequency therapy in and of itself works, like a singing bowl, yes, you know, for your root chakra. Things like that. It's because you're exposing your body to that frequency that it's resonating at that frequency. And the more you expose it to it, the more readily it will resonate at that, right?
Right.
Well, whereas that's kind of like going to the spa and getting a massage with sound, binaural beats is like taking your brain to the gym with that exact same frequency. Now, your brain will still lock into that frequency of the singing bowl. It may take a little bit longer, though. Now, what binaural beats does is it actively forces your brain into creating that target frequency. So I'm feeding you, instead of 528, I'm feeding you differential frequencies that total to 528, where that's the target frequency that is outside of those two. So it appears as a wobble unevenly between your left and right ears. And even talking with the Monroe Institute, like I've been on their show of talking about it with Scott Taylor, things like that. And he even asked me, like, how do you deal with the dissonance that comes about when you're dealing with a frequency of a chakra and you're trying to write music with it? Because eventually when you change chords, something might get dissonant. And I'm like, well, and number one, it's interesting to hear that y'all had the same situation I had.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to see the fact that, like, their research is there. It's been done for the longest time. Like since the 1960s, we've been using binaural beats. And it's really remarkable to see the fact that, yes, with enough binaural beat therapy, your brain will begin to create those frequencies more readily itself. And that's kind of the idea, is that it's an actual therapy, as opposed to just exposing your body to it and your body resonates to it while it's there. That it's the fact that it's training your brain to create that frequency that it's missing out on. That's the idea behind binaural beat.
That's encouraging.
Is that eventually, while you're using it for pain reduction, things like that, Tim, eventually your brain will trigger into that binaural beat faster. Will eventually start creating that binaural beat itself and start creating that frequency itself when it needs it. So it's literally like retraining your brain to do what it naturally should be doing. And our brains are horrifyingly overwrought. Man. Because they're pattern machines.
Yeah.
It did not used to be the case that we had this much data intake, Tim.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't.
Yeah.
You're only a few years older than me. I remember not locking my bike up at the local library. That's where I did research, because we didn't have the internet. We had whatever was in that card catalog, whatever was in the microfiche and on the shelves, and maybe something at an adjoining library that they could find for us and have shipped over.
Yep.
Or that we had to go get. We did not wake up with the news from Poughkeepsie on our mobile device.
No.
On an RSS alert, So our brains are made to be colanders that are filtering material and constantly filtering water and cleaning things. The problem is, now, instead of it being a nice trickle of water from the faucet, it's a torrential downpour from the gutter outside, and the colander is overflowing.
Yeah.
Our brains are so overactive. Like the first album that I released for therapy was literally for ADHD kids and people like me, who at 3 a.m. wake up with an idea and write the field observation log.
Wow.
Because they can't get it out of their head. They've been thinking about it for 2 years, and now it's waking them up at night. You got to be able to get sleep. You've got to be able to do that. Our brains it is so essential for that release of your brain and for the relaxation of things. So, yeah, that was when I began using these frequencies for the cause of good. Not just making people feel like something was behind them while I was writing a terrifying track or something like that.
But sometimes some of the most inspired ideas come from some of the things that you need the most. I mean, I'm talking about you yourself need the most, sometimes some of the best inventions come from just self-discovery and self-need. I mean, it just, you just go, God, I really need this, and I can't find it anywhere in the market. And so you invent it. Yeah,
no, and that's just it. It was one of those, like, and I called it. I was like, no, I'm pretty sure my kid will come out and be pretty well like me whenever it comes to just speedy brain. So yeah, like my son, and that album incorporates the sound of my wife's heartbeat in utero, the sound of my son's heartbeat in utero.
Oh, wow.
Things like that to embedded under the music to actually like preternaturally bring your brain back to that place.
Yeah.
You know, where we were warm, where we were safe, where we were relaxed, you know. And it's interesting because we live a life swathed by electromagnetic interference. Swathed by it. Whether you buy into the 5G thing or not, everybody. Here's the thing: as somebody who works with frequencies and like RF frequencies on a daily basis, there's good studies out there showing like metal fatigue in school buildings decades before it should have it because of Wi-Fi signals. Every hertz is a pulse per second. So when you're talking 2.4 gigahertz of your Wi-Fi signal, that is 2.4 billion times per second.
Yeah.
That pulse of power is going through the wall around you. That it's penetrating your body, things like that. So when you wonder why you feel sped up, there's a good reason. You know, for a long time, I practiced, Tim, what is called Black Sabbath, where on Sunday, TV got unplugged, Wi-Fi got turned off, phone got physically turned off. Back in the day, the battery got pulled out. Can't do that anymore.
No, you can't.
But you would be surprised what happens when you remove that fast-paced stimuli from your life for even just one day. Try it. Here's an experiment, everybody. For 1 week, I challenge you for 1 week, when you go to bed, unplug your Wi-Fi. Unplug your Wi-Fi router for 1 week when you go to bed. Write down how well you sleep every night, and I guarantee you by day 7, you will notice a much better sleep cycle in your life.
Really?
It is really interesting because that Wi-Fi signal every few seconds is like a burst of light to our brain. Our brain is a transducer inside of a resonant chamber. Like we are a fat and water transducer of nerves up here that are constantly sending and receiving radio signals constantly. So yeah, it's almost like a burst of light inside of your brain. It's like whenever you blink your eyes and you see that flash of light real quick. It's literally like you're blinking your eyes while you're asleep. So it's pretty interesting. And when you start getting into, especially even just the subliminal math of the way our eyes work and the way that a screen works, you know, back in our day, they called it the idiot box, Tim.
Yes. Yeah.
Don't sit in front of that thing too long, boy.
Yep.
You'll become a zombie.
Yep.
And the reason is our eyes see at 30 frames per second. A cathode ray tube flashes 30 times per second. Film was 30 frames per second, things like that. So you were literally seeing one image every time your eye saw light.
Yep.
You know, that's why it looked like natural fluid motion. We get tired. Incandescent lights flicker at 30 frames per second. That's why it looks like they are on constantly.
Yep.
It's pulsing. Now you start getting into things like fluorescent lights. HD televisions that flash at 60 frames per second. That's why you start getting headaches under fluorescent lighting. That's why you start getting more fatigued under fluorescent lighting. Your eyes are forced to see twice as fast as what they should. They're seeing a flash of light twice as frequently, so it gets fatigued twice as fast. You fall into that zombified state twice as fast. Don't even look at a 4K TV because that's 120 hertz. So You're falling into that zombified controllable state 4 times faster.
Christopher, I got an
watching
8K
a 4K TV.
I got an 8K upstairs.
I know, brother. They're talking. Hey, the NTSC Society said 12K will be the standard in the next couple of years. So get ready, baby.
Oh no.
But it's also frequencies. And when you look at that 12K signal on a 4K TV, the white is like blinding. You know, like when you look at the news, when you look at sports, and white is like, oh man, that's like looking at the sun. It's literally because you're looking at 4 million more colors. By the time that you have, and this is just audio visual math, pixel math, things like that. By the time that you have gone from 1080p to 4K, you have added a whole another million gamuts of color for the red, green, blue, which means your white is now 4 times more vibrant. So it literally wears on our eyes more, things like that. The blue and the blue screen is more intense, you know? So it's one of those like, and at some point it's literally the fact of your brain can't even see that. Like your eyes are not even capable of processing that much data. When it comes to 8K, 12K, things like that. It looks beautiful, it looks amazing, but we have to use algorithms to correct it so our eyes see it right.
Wow.
You know? And on the same note, going backward, you know, when people are in social media groups and they're like, oh, how are they 4K upgrading all these 35 millimeter movies? A 35 millimeter frame has more than 4K resolution inside of it. That's how.
Huh.
We just never had the projection to be able to show all the resolution inside of it. Now we do. So, like a 35 millimeter frame of film has more than 4K worth of data inside of it. So we've always been processing in that high of a resolution. We've just never had the technology to be able to show it. It's remarkable. And our brains operate off every bit of this. You know, they look for these patterns. They are hungry for these patterns, and they get overwrought with them. You know, there is a great study that was done right up around the time of COVID by the National Institute of Health showing hippocampal damage. Now, the hippocampus of your brain is what controls a lot of your emotional center. It is literally the gateway to your amygdala. Mm-hmm. And for those that don't know, the amygdala is that tiny, beautiful little almond-shaped gland in your brain that is basically the reptilian brain. It's the home of fight or flight mechanism, you know, things like that. It's the home of our true survival instinct. And this study showed that hippocampal damage was done to people when they watch negative news cycles.
Really?
So people who are regularly exposed to a negative news cycle, that negativity literally does damage to your hippocampus.
Really?
And leaves you in a state of fight or flight.
Huh.
And it is pretty remarkable to see that. You know, that there is an actual study by the National Institute of Health on the negative effects on your brain from negative news cycles. So it's quite literally frequency. Frequency means the regularity at which something happens. How frequently are you thinking in a negative way? Because you have to retrain your brain to think positively. You have to retrain yourself to not think in a negative way, to give people the benefit of the doubt, you know, to even to logically look at something as you're taking notes in the field. You have to retrain your brain to do that, Tim, because the negativity, unfortunately, will take root and will cause damage.
So literally, I feel stupid saying this, the literal cure is to go out and touch grass. Go outside, enjoy nature. Go outside,
man.
Touch grass.
Take your hat off when you go outside. Make sure you get sunlight on your pineal gland.
Yeah.
Like most people don't realize that soft spot on the child's head is where the skull grows together to cover the pineal gland. That's still to this day the thinnest part of your skull, and how your brain tells the difference between nighttime and daytime. So when you're inside all the time, like, it literally loses its circadian cycle. It needs, or sidereal cycle, sorry. It needs to see the sun. Your brain needs to see that frequency of light, and we are surrounded by it all the time. Even the idea that our eyes and our ears only filter a very specific bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum, Tim. Very specific bandwidths. There are people like Maureen Seberg out there, the amazing author. She's written for Psychology Today for years and has a great book, Fearfully and Wonderfully Made. She is a tetrachromic.
Okay.
And that book is about her experience as a tetrachromic. For those that don't know, tetrachromic means you see yellow as well as red, green, and blue with the cones of your eyes. So she sees the world like a parrot. There's another million colors that she is able to see that we are not. The world literally appears totally differently to her.
That's crazy.
And it's because her eyes see in that different filter. Our ears only hear 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. There's a whole spectrum of sound outside of that we are not privy to. But at that point, it becomes the realm of we can feel it. We can intangibly feel it. And it's there and it's present, but we don't know what it is. And by all ninth grade science, my friend, we are 90% empty space.
Wow.
We are not even here. You and I right now, despite our distance, Tim, we are sharing an electron shell.
Yep.
By all ninth grade science. It's remarkable to think about. We are frequency.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great. It's beautiful.
It's a wonderful thing. I tell you, Christopher, I've enjoyed our time today, and again, folks,
Absolutely.
if you want to hear some more great stuff, Christopher's got a lot on his Curious Realm podcast. We have a link in the description of this program, and of course, if you want to log, and you should be logging everything you're doing out in the field, the field observation and encounter log is available as well. We have a link to that as well in the description of this program, so that you can pick up a copy and. Of course, go log whatever it is you're doing, whether you're squatching, whether you're out there tracking UFOs, or if you're out there in the field and you're investigating ghosts, or you're going on some of these trips that are being offered out there and going and chasing ghosts as well. That should be something that you should be doing as well. Christopher, I want to thank you so much for such an enlightening show.
Hey, anytime.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
And opening our eyes to what it is that's out there. Again, I have people that are clamoring all the time. They say, Tim, we should have more science in our paranormal. Well, they got the fire hose today, my friend. That's for sure.
It's there. That's the thing. And you're the one that brings it, everybody. So, at one point, these topics were things that people didn't even talk about at a coffee shop. So now it's the fact of it. It's our job to change the world of the paranormal as we see it. It's our job to make this handshake happen.
That's right. That's right. Christopher Jordan, thank you so much for being on Darkness Radio today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
I want to thank Christopher Jordan for being with us today. Again, the book is in the description of this podcast. I really think it's a good idea to be logging every single one of your investigations, whether you're doing a ghost investigation, whether it's a UFO investigation, or you're squatching. Either one of those three, any type of paranormal investigation, you should be logging it scientifically, because let's face it, our equipment isn't the most reliable way to be doing a scientific investigation, and memory is fallible. It just is. And we should be doing it scientifically to begin with. And let's face it, when we're out there and we're in the field, we want something to be reliable and to remember exactly what happened on this investigation. And it's a good record for future generations of people who are interested in what it is we're doing, whether it be family, whether it be friends or future colleagues. And so it's something for us to hand down, something tangible for us to hand down to those people who are interested in what we're doing. So again, link in the description of this program. And you can pick up a copy of Christopher Jordan's book and use that log in your investigations. So I've got kind of a weird story. I don't know. Yeah, you can file this just under random stuff Tim says to you at the end of a week. And by the way, you'll hear my smoke alarm beeping at me. It's time to change batteries. I know, odd thing, but as we're talking at the end of the week, and we're coming up on the weekend here. By the way, I'm so excited for this Deadpool Wolverine movie that's coming out today as we're speaking. So rush to the theater and go see that this weekend. The other thing is, and by the way, I'm also going to try and grab my nephew and try and get his perspective on it. Maybe I'll get him here on the program. We'll talk about it a little bit and do a movie review with him. He is itching to get on this program, by the way. So that's another thing. So here's the weird random story for the week. You just have to imagine this, folks, okay? So I'm in an Arizona brace now. I'm no longer in a cast or anything for my Charco foot. So I've been enjoying the summer outside. A lot of times I'll bring my equipment outside when, not my broadcasting equipment, obviously, but like my laptop and stuff when I'm booking guests or an iPad when I'm reading books for different guests that appear here on the program. And I'll spend my time outside with the chipmunks. I mean, I only have so much time with my little buddies, right? Well, one of my little buddies is a lot more charismatic and has a little bit more of a personality than the rest. And that would be Indy, who was just born this year. He's just a little guy, right? Well, the reason he was named Indy is not only because he's got a very reddish-brown top to him, including a little reddish-brown top to him that looks like it could be a little hat, like Indiana Jones, but he's also very brave. And that's why he was given the name Indy. Well, Indy is not only so brave that he just comes right up to you and sidles right up to you, and he's right at your side, right? And he's practically underfoot whatever you do. And he's happy. He's a happy guy. But he's also... I know this sounds kind of crazy. As a little guy, he was also one of the first chippers to take peanuts from us. Now, he would take them from intern Yoko, but he wouldn't take them from my hand. So last week, I was like, you know what? If he's taking them from her, he's got to take one from me. So I was bound and determined to get him to take a peanut from me. Well, I was sitting there in the chair, and he was kind of skittish. He didn't want to do it. And all it is just bending over in a chair and trying to hand it to him. But he would kind of walk around and walk away. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to chase him. That's not the way you do it. So you just kind of throw him. The way you do it is you just kind of throw him closer and closer and closer to you until he's right by you. And you just kind of bring it down slow and let him grab the peanut from you, right? Well, Indy wasn't having it. So finally, I went to where he was, right? I went to where his den was. And I was sitting outside his den, which happens to be right outside where the garage is. So imagine this, if you will. It's a warm day. And Indy's kind of outside the garage, and I'm outside the garage, right where the driveway is. And I brought a few peanuts with me. And I said, good morning, Indy. And he kind of looked at me like, good morning, right? And I said, would you like some peanuts? And he's all excited, right? So he comes over. And I pitch him the first one. And he takes it and he kind of tears it open, puts them in his pouch. And I said, would you like a second peanut? And he comes closer. And I get closer. And I still kind of give it to him, but I kind of drop it in front of my fingers. But this time I'm down on my knees. Now, keep in mind, with Charco foot, it's hard to get down on the ground, right? So you're kind of wondering what I'm doing. He's kind of looking at me weird, like I'm not standing up. He's okay with me standing up. He's okay with me sitting in a chair. He's not okay with me kneeling. No, he's very uncomfortable, right? So I get down on my knees, and he's like, "Ooh, I don't know." So then he kind of backs out, and he's walking around the lip of the garage now, like, "Ooh, I don't know. You're freaking me out, dude. This whole on your knees thing, I don't know if I like it." So I sit in the driveway. Now he's really uncomfortable. If you've ever seen a chipmunk with anxiety, which is the weirdest thing in the world, this chipmunk had full-blown anxiety. This went on for 7 minutes. If you've ever seen a chipmunk pace, he paced. He paced back and forth and around, and he looked at me, and he saw I had one more peanut left. And I said, "Indy, come here and take this peanut. Come here and take this peanut from Papa." And I'm holding the peanut out in my hand. And I'm holding it low to the ground so he knows it's his. And all he has to do is come and take it from my hand. Now, this is very Karate Kid, right? Come on, kid, come take the peanut from my hand. If you take the peanut from my hand, you've then graduated, right? You're a graduated chipper. Nope. He's pacing. He's rocking back and forth. You can see his little heart's beating. The poor little guy is he's not having a good day. And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm just torturing him. Well, I'm sitting with my legs facing the street. Okay, so my legs are facing the street. My hand is facing him. He's at the lip of the garage. And just as I'm talking to him, saying, "Come on, Andy, come on over and grab a peanut," one of my neighbors stops her car and thinks I'm down in the driveway and I'm having an emergency. She goes, "Excuse me, are you having trouble? Can I help you?" No, I'm just down here trying to train my chipmunk how to take a peanut. And she goes, Oh, you are. And she looks and she goes, "Hi." And I go, "His name is Indy." And she goes, "Hi, Indy." And Indy kind of stops looking at me and looking at the peanut and turns and looks at her like, "Hey, lady, can you explain to this guy that we have an arrangement? Like he's supposed to drop the peanut and then I take it and then everything's all good?" He just kind of has that look on his face. To which at that point, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to stop torturing this poor little guy. It's been 7 minutes of hell for him. I think, okay, here's what I'm going to do. So I said, "Andy, here's the deal. I'm just going to drop the peanut right here." And I just dropped the peanut and I kept my hand in front of it. And he walked over slowly, took the peanut and he tore it open in front of me, in front of my hand. So he's about not even 2 inches away from my hand, just to show me that there's trust there. And he tore open the peanut and he put the nuts in his pouch. And then he just walked back to his den and went in his den. And I thought, oh, what a good little boy. So I went up to the porch. I went inside to grab something to drink. Went up to the porch. By the time I came back out onto the porch to start work again, there was Indy on the porch waiting for more peanuts. And I thought, oh, what a good kid, right? He came up for more peanuts. So I said, "You want more peanuts, boy?" So I sat down, I grabbed another peanut, and sure enough, when I sit down and I go to hand him another peanut, I'm just about to drop it, took it right out of my hand and then went off to his den. He took it out of my hand the minute I sat down. So it just goes to show you. In life, you can have all the patience in the world, nothing will happen. The minute you don't expect it and you just go with the flow, stuff happens for you. How's that for your long lesson today? And it all came from a chipmunk. Go figure. So that'll do it for this week, folks. We got a really good week coming in store for you, especially True Crime Tuesday. True Crime Tuesday is going to be an awesome guest next week. And then we've got... we also have a really good guest. Next week, we've got, just put it this way, we're going to focus on ghosts next week. So I can give you that much of a hint for next week. But we got some really good guests coming up through August, folks. And we're going to deal with a multitude of different topics. It's not going to be focused on just aliens or just cryptids or whatnot. We're going to be all over the board this next month. By the way, if there's a guest you want to hear, holler at me, tim@darknessradio.com, and we will get that guest on for you. Thank you so much for continuing to listen, folks. Your listenership is greatly appreciated. I love you. I appreciate you. And again, when you go to listen to the episodes, I know it's nice to want to binge listen to put them all together. if you can, try to listen to them within a week or two of getting them. Reason being is that the advertisers don't like to pay, and that gets me in trouble with my network. So if you can, try to download them within a week or two of getting them or subscribing or just downloading, and help me out. I appreciate that. Also, if you're not aware by now, yes, there's video with some of the episodes along with the audio. It's real simple. Just go to darknessradioshow.com to the episode that you're interested in and check for video along with the audio. Just go to that particular episode and see if there's a video component or a YouTube video along with it. It's stacked right on top of the podcast. So there you go. Also, be sure to check the shop while you're there at darknessradioshow.com and the events page to see where we're going to be around the nation and near you. That'll do it. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the best in true crime and paranormal podcasting. This is Darkness Radio.